Hello, welcome to Revelate Alpha. Hope you're all well. So this is a Sunday afternoon show. I'm coming live. Instead of doing a video, I thought I'd just come out and live. And if anybody's out there, you watch your channel, you want to have a quick chat about certain things, let us know. But this whole live show, or this whole video really, live show is all to do with Harley Davidson and this new Sprint motorcycle that we've been talking about for a few months now. But also, the opposite end of the kind of motorcycle discussion, Honda have just released their 2026 model updates for 125s. And you got the DAX, you got the monkey bike, but they've also got the Super Cub in. Now, I'll get onto this a little bit later on, but there's quite a mystery around the Super Cub for me, because they were supposed to have discontinued it. So what's going on? I just don't know. But I wanted to start with Harley Davidson and this Sprint motorcycle. Look, I suppose, if you're watching this and you're a Harley Davidson fan, you probably might have mixed reactions for the reveal, their Chapter 2 reveal in early January or mid-January of their new bikes. And pretty much it was the Taurus that were, that they'd brought out, or that they just told you about. No big changes. Yeah, colours, stylings. They brought out those limited bikes, which essentially are just big touring bikes, whether they're the ultras of the past or limiteds of the past. They've kind of all merged it into one to make, a road glide or a street glide limited. You got the CVOs, you got the ST bikes with the kind of performance bikes. 117 engines, some have got VVT, some are just high output. You got 121 VVTs or high output. It just goes on and on. But essentially, it's just those bikes. The Road King is gone. The Road King Special. Whether that's going to come back in another form or another guise later in the year, who knows? I haven't certainly heard anything about that either. But what I think was really interesting is that what we'd been led to believe was that Harley Davidson were bringing out a new model. They're coming out in a new direction. They were definitely going to give us something to really think about. I'm not so sure whether that was anything really to think about. Now, look, it's, as I said before, if you like what they do and if you like what they're doing with these Taurus and everything, that's fine. But I just don't think there's a big element of change here, or I just don't think there's nothing to really wonder about. Now, the interesting thing here is when you look at all the discussions that we had about the Harley Davidson Sprint of the last few months, when the news came out, was it summer last year, that they were going to produce a smaller bike. Well, we know that they already produce the smaller bikes, right? But not for the American market, not for the European market. We know that in India, they've got the Hero partnership, and that is with their X440. In China, they've got the QJ Motor relationship, a partnership, and that produces the X350 and the X500. The X500 is like the Benelli Leoncino. The X300 is it's just X350 is just it's just a smaller bike, right? The X350 they took to the United States, although some people have been saying, no, it's the X440 that they took to the United States in their training academies. It's not. It's the X350 from China that they've taken over there, but only to be used in the academies and not to be ridden, right? They're low-powered bikes. So the question, I've always said that the X350, the X500, but especially the X440 from India should be made available in European markets and also in the United States for those people who want it. Granted, most people probably won't want them. But, if you're looking for a Harley Davidson bike, and if you want to buy a bike that's got the Harley Davidson branding, and especially if you're just going to pootle around, the city or something like that, they'd be great little bikes, right? They'd be great little bikes just to pootle around on, no problem. But then again, the market is flooded with these kinds of bikes. Well, not flooded so much, but there are lots of other bikes on the market that are relatively inexpensive, and they do the job very, very well, and the tech on them is so good. So if Harley Davidson are going to bring these bikes to the market, they've got to compete on price, but they also got to compete on tech. But I thought there's definitely a market there for it. There's definitely a market, and people will buy those bikes if they're attractive enough in terms of usability or functionality, in a particular environment, especially if you're not going on long distances, short distances. It's what these bikes really aim for, right? Or in a riding environment which suits that. And let's say in Europe, they would be okay. In other parts of the world, they certainly are okay. In the United States, possibly with their riding environment and their riding habits or usage is probably not going to be that good. But in terms of certain areas of the United States, any city areas or any sort of young person who wants to get into biking, yeah, this is a great way to go, right? Especially if they're cheap enough. So the question is, well, is this sprint that they've been talking about for the last, 6 months or whatever it was, all the rumours have been talking about, right? Is it actually one of these bikes that they're actually just going to badge? Well, let's just say they did that. Let's just say they do what I've always said that they should do in terms of bring these bikes, these X440, X350, X500s to the European market, and to the American market, right? If they do that. But what they do, they just rename it, rebadge it. Well, that would be almost like corporate suicide for me, because that would be something where you're just saying, well, you're not bringing us anything new. You've just rebadged something that you already make in different countries. You'd get a lot more respect from me as a motorcycle user or potential motorcycle buyer if you said, no, we're actually going to bring the X440, X350, X500 to the European and American markets now. And look, have these bikes. This for me, this would have been an easy sell, an easy transition. Just bring those bikes, and if they want to sell, they'll sell. And if they don't want to sell, they won't sell. But at least you know where you're at in terms of that marketplace. The problem is that if you decide as a manufacturer to say, oh, we're going to charge a little bit extra because guess what? This is Harley Davidson. You're pulling the wool over nobody's eyes there, because everybody will see that. Everybody will see that and say, no, this is absolute nonsense. We're not paying the Harley Davidson tax on a bike like that, especially because it's not made, it's made in India or China or whatever. We're not paying for that. So it's got to be comparable on price to whatever Chinese or Indian bikes are already in the market for your market where you're going to buy it, right? So take the likes of the X440. If you bring it over to European market, you're going to be talking about £4,000, something like that. So if you try to sell it in the UK for £5,500, you're already onto a loser, because there's so many other manufacturers out there who are already producing 350, 400cc bikes that are in that price range and below. You've got other manufacturers that are producing really high quality 400, 500cc bikes, and they might be charging a little bit more, the likes of Triumph, but they are really good quality bikes, great bikes. Okay, so Harley Davidson are going to be in a real problem here. They find themselves in a really sticky situation if they can't sort this out, if they can't get this right. I don't believe that the X440 or the X3 or the X350, X500 from China and India, respectively, I don't think they are this sprint. I certainly, it would be something that you would look at it and you go, well, we're being totally shortchanged here. So the question is, what is it? When is it going to come? I would imagine, given that they haven't done anything in the January market, I think that what they've done is that they've wanted to separate what they perceive as the big changes in the touring lineup away from anything else new that they want to bring to the market, or new directions, or trying to attract new customers, all that sort of stuff. I think what they've done is they've said, we know where our core audience is, regardless of what we think in terms of aging out and all that kind of stuff. We know where our core audience is. Our core audience is always going to be older people with a bit more money in their pocket to be able to afford these kind of bikes, right? So we always question, well, how many people are there who are actually buying these bikes? Well, obviously, substantially enough to be able to put all this emphasis, especially when you think about the trikes. I said in a previous video, initially I was a bit surprised that they put all this emphasis on the trikes, and then I kind of realised, well, actually, no, the aging demographic, which we were talking about, that are not buying Harley Davidsons anymore, actually, this makes really sense. This makes a lot of sense. Because just because you don't feel you can ride big, heavy bikes anymore, big Taurus or whatever it is, Harley Davidsons anymore, doesn't mean that you lose that passion for bikes, right? So maybe instead you just you'll go off 2 wheels and you just transition onto 3 wheels. It kind of makes sense, right? There's no right or wrong here. It kind of makes absolute sense. Or you go for a much lighter motorcycle, or you just quit riding altogether, right? Whatever. There's a few options to you. So for Harley Davidson as a company to exploit that transition of a rider from 2 wheels to possibly 3, or if they're going to go away from motorcycle into 4, into a cars, I think that's right for them to do so. So I think they wanted to separate that. So now I'm thinking, when are we likely to see these new bikes, whatever they are, whether it's just one bike, a sprint, 300-400cc bike, whatever it is, when are we likely to see it? I think it's going to be a mid-year reveal. I think this is what we're looking at. We're looking at a mid-year reveal of the sprint. Now, when we likely to see that in the next, probably a little bit more. If it's going to happen, it's probably going to happen within the next couple of months in terms of starting to have a little bit more information drip fed to us, maybe some leaked photos, that kind of stuff. We're already seeing a few silhouettes out there. There's already been a couple of little, we don't know how real this is. There's no point in showing you photos because it's just, at this stage, you kind of think, is that real? Is that not? Is that somebody just made that up? AI sort of imagery right now. Who knows? Who knows what it is? But the reality is, if you think about this from a business point of view, you want to separate your big money earners from anything new. You don't want to distract from that. You don't want to take away from that or detract away from that. So I think actually, it kind of makes sense to me now why we didn't hear anything about the sprint in the Chapter 2 reveal. It kind of makes perfect sense. The question is, when they eventually reveal this bike, are they going to target it appropriately, and who will want to buy it? Because there's going to be whichever way you look at this, there's going to be some people who are being different to it. They'll be like, yeah, so what? There'll be others that will be like, well, this is fantastic. This is exactly what Harley Davidson needs to do. And then there'll be others who would be like, what a complete waste of time. I don't want any of that Chinese junk here, regardless of wherever it was made, right? It doesn't matter where it's made. So for the American audience, especially, I would imagine, especially with things that are going on in the United States right now in terms of government policy, tariffs, all that kind of stuff, I would imagine that their only option is to make that in the United States. You're going to make that in the United States, and I think the only option will be it won't be as cheap as we hoped it would be. And if it is going to be cheap and made in America, it's either going to be run as a unit loss. In other words, they're not going to make any money on it. They'll probably lose money on it, or they're going to have to price it so they at least break even or make a bit of profit. If that's the case, it'll probably priced out the market. Even with tariffs, even with stuff like that, you're probably going to buy cheaper imports from the likes of India and China, like for like type of bikes, than you would the United States, unless they're looking at other ways of doing it. So they're going to have big problems in terms of releasing this bike, the Sprint, making it affordable, making it realistically affordable for the American market, but also European market as well, if it comes to Europe, and also attracting the right kind of people who are going to want to buy it. I just feel that potentially there are other bikes on the market that are much, much better at this and already well established. Because you remember, you're not only selling a Harley Davidson new model, you're trying to capture the imagination of a brand new set of people. or the existing Harley Davidson riders and say to them, hey, do you want an extra little bike just to have a bit of fun with? Hey, if you got a truck or you've got a camper or whatever, that kind of thing. Hey, maybe you just get one of these little bikes and you go away for the weekend, you take it off your truck and you have a little ride around. It's great. I can see the benefits to this. 100% I can see the benefits to this. I can see how many people, and as somebody like myself, would look at a small bike like this and say 100% I could use this, and I use this a lot and have a whole load of fun with it. For those of you who are Harley Davidson fans or big bike fans, let's just say, not Harley Davidson, that's the wrong thing to say, but big bike fans, you're probably going to look at this and go, I don't want a small bike, until you get on one, until you see how much fun you can have on it. I always sort of said this in the past, 125 bikes, 50cc bikes, you wouldn't want to use them every day, especially if you've been riding big bikes. But I tell you what, you can have so much fun on them. Especially if you're talking riding city streets, right? Fantastic. They are great. They are great fun. Little scooters, they're fantastic fun and really effective and really usable, right? Going off-road and just having a bit of fun off-road. Little, 125, 250s, 300s, whatever. Going off-road, really, really capable. In fact, in many ways, you don't need anything bigger than that, because you're going to have loads of fun on those anyway. So I think to a certain point, you're going to have great usage of these, and it's going to attract a lot of people, but you're going to have to change the mindset in a lot of people's eyes. So to that end, then I want to change this over now to Honda. So Honda, let me just show you what they've done. I've got the notification the other day, a couple of days ago actually, about the Honda Super Cub. Let me just show the web here. There we go. Honda Super Cub. Hopefully you can see my voice. There we go. They've got their brand new bike for 2026. And this is all the blurb. And basically, nothing has changed, really. They got a new colour, this new sort of silver-ish colour for 2026. Engine's still the same. Suspension's still the same. I think there's a few tweaks here and there. But interestingly, what they say here, 2025... the Super Cub 125 gained Euro 5 Plus compliance thanks to minor revisions to the fuel-efficient air-cooled engine. Nothing changes mechanically for year 2026. Okay, right. The reason why I mention this, and I'll get onto the confusion here, is that you've got a bike here. Let me just bring up this again. You've got a bike here that sold millions all over the world, right? Sold millions all over the world. But it's functional and it's great fun and lots of people love it and lots of people would have it and young people can get on it and all that sort of stuff. Now, I'm not saying, don't get me wrong, if you're a Harley Davidson fan saying, oh, what, they're going to produce a bike like that? That's stupid. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is there are lots of other bikes that are very small bikes that are bought and ridden and loved the world over, millions and millions. But it's you as an individual, as a mindset to say, okay, would I be happy having fun on one of these? I've ridden these bikes. If you're in the UK, these are very, very common bikes throughout the 70s and 80s and everything, C90s, C50s, C70s, C90s, and then 125s, and then they become a Super Cub afterwards, in terms of lineage and everything like that. All throughout Europe, all throughout Africa, all throughout Asia, right? These bikes have sold millions and millions. Well, they sold millions, right? And you think, well, the classic example of small bikes that can sell in great numbers and people having fun and really being really functional, right? So could Harley Davidson do something like this? Could they enter the market and capture that mindset? And attract people who want that kind of thing. I'm not saying they have to produce a bike like that, but I'm saying that actually this might not be a bad way to go, as well as something like a Sprint, right? Conventional 125. It might be something that makes people think, oh, what? That's something different. I like that, right? Or you might hate it, right? Interestingly, on the blurb here, I've got to show you this because I thought it was quite funny, right? This is the 125. The history of it. Where is it? I'll have to find it for you here. The facts, right? Here we go. The facts. There we go. Oh, here we go. Right. It had to the original design of this bike. It had to avoid the need for a clutch lever, so there's no clutch on it, right? So it's just this transmission that they've got, so that delivery riders could ride one-handed with a stack of soba noodle boxes on the left shoulder. So that's the original design for it, right? You had to be riding it along, and you had to be able to have a stack of, of noodle boxes. And I thought that's really funny, right? So they've made a bike. I mean, if you like these kind of bikes, like the CT125, right, the off-road version of this, basically, great bikes. I mean, they are fantastic bikes. So if Harley Davidson are going to produce smaller bikes, what I'm saying is they've got to be able to compete with something that's already captured the imagination, that already fulfills a great purpose. What Harley Davidson can come into in the market is something new that piques the interest of people, and that they can, certainly look at it and go, wow, that's a Harley Davidson. Oh, that's really cool. Now lots of people mock the AMF years, right? And they don't like it, and there's lots of reasons for that. Absolutely right. But what Harley Davidson did right at the time was produce a whole load of Aramaki kind of inspired bikes, those AMF bikes, those small bikes, and it got people into it. It got people into riding bikes all over, and those bikes were great. Great functionality, loads of fun. People were riding them all over the place, or young people as well. Look, fun. They might have been crap in certain respects, but on the other hand, their legacy lasts a long time because of what it means to a lot of people, right? So I think this is an interesting place for Harley Davidson to be, in terms of, well, if you want to bring out these new bikes, and you've already kind of leaked out that a new bike is coming, the Sprint, I don't think you need to shortchange yourself in just producing one bike. I think you need to look at this from a mindset point of view to say, well, hold on, we need to re-engineer, reprogram the way people think about Harley Davidson riding enjoyment, the experience of riding Harley Davidsons. And it doesn't have to be big cruisers, big tourers. It can be fun riding experience. And I think if Harley Davidson can do that, they're onto a winner. And if they can do that with more than one motorcycle, then they're onto a real winner. So let's get back into this web. I just want to show you something here. The big problem that they're going to have, and I've already alluded to it, is this. So the Super Cub to 2026 here in the UK is £3,999, £4,000, right? That's actually become a lot cheaper than it used to be. I'm sure that's come down in price since 2024 or something, right? But here's the other mystery about this Super Cub here. I was convinced, and I'm not even sure if I'm remembering correctly here. That's the thing. I'm not even sure if I'm remembering correctly. But I was under the impression that Honda, with the Super Cub, had discontinued it 2025 for 2026. I thought they discontinued it. I thought it wasn't going to be made anymore. I thought that was it. The information that I got a few months ago, about 6 months ago, was that this bike would be no more. And I thought it was a tragedy at the time. I thought, they shouldn't be doing that. They should just keep this going. Now, whether that was false information, or whether right now I'm thinking about it, then, and I think, did I misunderstand at the time? I don't know. But regardless, they haven't, right? They're going to continue with it. So part of me thinks, well, what is the decision making on their part to continue with this bike? Well, it's kind of obvious. Right? They're continuing this bike because it sells so many around the world. It sells so many riders, male, female, young, old, whatever persuasion, whatever gender identity you want to, whatever it is, it doesn't make a difference. I'm just talking people, right? People of all persuasions, of all generations, of all styles, or whatever, right? They're buying this bike. So if they're buying them, they're selling them. Guess what? It'd be marvelous, because you could throw this at other companies, lots of other companies that are not producing these kinds of bikes, to say, if you capture what Honda have captured in terms of usability, functionality, fun in the smaller CC classes, being able to sell it in multiple countries all over the world in high volume, incredibly high volume, then you've got a winner, and that's something that you should be aspiring to. Something that you should be aiming towards. Now, many of you out there would say, look, we're not going to buy a Harley Davidson Super Cub scooter. You're probably right. But these things take a long time to get into the psyche, to make people understand, actually, what do we really want out of a bike? We want something. We know that this is changing already. That people are looking at price, they're looking at usability, they're looking at efficiency, they're looking at all this sort of stuff. But just getting onto these bikes and jump and go and twist and go type thing. If you're looking at a company like Indian, like Harley Davidson, like Triumph, like BMW, whatever, BMW and Triumph have responded to this and started to address that. Harley Davidson, Indian, haven't responded to it. Well, certainly Harley Davidson haven't. We're kind of expecting this sprint to come in. So my point was, if you're only going to come in with one bike, I just don't think it shows enough commitment. I think you need to come in with a bit more, 2 or 3 bikes. If you're going to do it properly. Come out with 2 or 3 bikes, 4 bikes, in this kind of low CC, usability, fun kind of thing, to attract, a fun rider out there, or a biker who wants a fun riding experience. Come out with that. Come out with a road 350, 400cc bike, whatever, 250cc, yeah? Come out with a off-roady capable trail bike, right? Something that's very similar to like a 1970s trail bike, something like that. That captures the imagination. Come out with a scooter type bike like this. That's similar kind of, it's got a quirky look about it, and it's good, but it's fun, it's functional. Come out with something like that. Maybe come out with something that, like a 700 or 800cc bike as well. Come out with something that people are going to take note. This takes time. This takes a lot of R&D. This takes a lot of design and planning. It's going to take a couple of years. But what I'm saying is that if you were 6 months ago, you're leaking that this sprint is going to come out. Well, 6 months has already passed. 8 months has already passed. So you could have well been on your way to designing and thinking about other bikes and the marketplace as a whole. If you see it, you've got to be looking at other. You can't just sit there and say, we are Indian, we are Harley Davidson, we only do this, right? You've got to be looking at what others are doing and how successful they are. And if they're doing it well, then you kind of think we need to tap into that. Because guess what? And I will leave you with this. Honda motorcycles, that's exactly what they do. They look at the marketplace. They look at what everybody else is producing, right? And they look at their own product lineup, their own motorcycles that they produce. And they say, right, that company over there, that manufacturer are producing that kind of bike. Do we have a motorcycle like that? And the answer is no, we don't. Guess what? They produce a motorcycle that they slot into that little segment. And guess what? It sells in numbers. Because one, they're Honda, also, global presence, but also they're great bikes. Well engineered, they work, they get you from, and this is what, Honda are renowned for, not having a lot of sort of creativity in inverted commas, but what they have is build quality, they work, they're reliable, so on and so forth. So Harley Davidson have got to get into that a little bit. They've got to produce great bikes, which, it depends on which way you look at it. You say, yeah, these are great bikes. But they've got to tap into the usability, the fun, but the reliability. They've got to be a good product. But they all ultimately got to come in on price. Because if you've got a a Cub, Super Cub 125 at 4,000, and there's so many of these other bikes, like the BSAs, like the Chinese brands, the Indian brands, are coming in at sub 4,000, 4,500. Then you're getting the BMWs and the Triumphs and some other bikes out there that are starting to produce the bikes in the £5,000-6,000 bracket, and also some of their bigger bikes, they're coming out and they're quite inexpensive. Then you're looking at the bigger bikes now being produced by Chinese brands like Vogue, that kind of thing, the off-road bikes, fantastic ADV bikes, adventure bikes, £6,000, £7,000, £8,000, whatever it is. You're getting a hell of a lot of motorcycle. CF Moto, again, another one. Hell of a lot of motorcycle for very little money. Well, relative terms, very little money. So I'm not going to harp on about the problems that Harley Davidson could have in relationship to those other brands. But what I'm saying is, in terms of the Sprint, it's got to be something that they've produced and not something that's already come from, that we already know is in existence, and they're going to rebrand it. No, that doesn't work, because that's almost like you're trying to defraud the Harley Davidson world out there, or the motorcycle world out there. But if it's something new, then you say, okay, this is something new, but you've got to back it up with something else. You can't just put it out there and let it die. You've got to be able to go there with a full commitment to say, hey, this is something we're going to do. We want fun. We want and everything. And, if you take the likes of Honda, you take the likes of other brands, and they say, this is what we do. We're producing bikes that, young people, older people, whatever, all ages, all demographics, they want to buy these bikes. And guess what? Why wouldn't you? If you like what I do here, keep on watching, and I catch you again in another video coming very soon, another live stream, and hopefully next time you'll join and you'll be able to come in with a chat as well. But let us know in the comments below what you think about Harley Davidson, and when do you think they'll be when do you think they'll be releasing this new bike, this Sprint? I've got a feeling it's going to be a mid-year reveal. I think in the next couple of months we're going to start to hear a lot more about this Sprint, and possibly other bikes coming soon. Right, and with that, catch you again on another live show.